Chapter 1. I arrived 20 minutes late to my first day at Haversham Assurance because the subway was a literal site of cishet oppression. Manspreading everywhere, no acknowledgement of my energy needs, and my neurodivergent processing style requires a gentle ramp-up into capitalist time structures, which is a valid accommodation I shouldn't have to explain. The receptionist looked at me like I'd committed a crime when I'd breezed in, so I checked my privilege out loud. I recognize I have access to reliable transit, even if it's problematic, and corrected her pronouns before she could even speak. Karen Rue Harper, she, her, and sometimes they, them when the intersectional vibe calls for it. Lived experience, you know? She nodded slowly. I could tell she wasn't fully grasping the gravity of the moment. My office space had a window, which I immediately blessed as resistant sunlight filtering through the colonial glass. I unpacked my Smash the Patriarchy tote. Ethically questionable origins, but intention matters more than supply chains. Hung the "In This House We Believe" poster Dad paid for without ever understanding why, and sat down to draft the first pronoun training email. I sipped my $14 oat milk latte, radical self-care after surviving public transit trauma, and felt the heteronormative hierarchy already trembling under the weight of my presence. Gary from Claims Processing introduced himself around 10:30. 58, khakis, wedding ring, the full patriarchal package. Nice to meet you, miss. Actually, colleague, not miss, assuming marital status is a microaggression, and it's she, her today, though I reserve the right to shift to they, them if the energy in the space calls for it. I smiled patiently while he blinked several times. He mumbled something about "welcome aboard," and backed away slowly. I could already see he wasn't going to survive the new era. His lived experience was too rooted in the old one. By lunch I had the list ready. Mandatory pronoun training for all staff by month's end. DEI Fridays with no exceptions, even if someone claims client calls. Client calls can wait. Equity cannot. Mental health days triggered by any major political event. The news cycle alone would keep us in perpetual self-care mode. And an immediate end to professionalism standards that disproportionately police women and non-binary folks. Professionalism is just white supremacy with better lighting and a tie. I spent the afternoon on Slack, instead of reviewing the employee handbook. Why read a document written by dead white men when I could start a channel called Office Culture Revolution and post an infographic about emotional labor? 47 people viewed it. 3 reacted with thumbs up. Progress is incremental, but visible. Around 3 o'clock the CEO, Richard, probably golfs on weekends, poked his head in. Settling in, Karen? I feel like I'm navigating a powerful learning moment already, I said. This entire space has so much potential once we decolonize it from top to bottom. He laughed like I was making a joke. I wasn't. I never joke about decolonization. That night I posted a carefully curated grid photo of my desk. The Hydro Flask covered in obscure radical stickers, the crystals, the poster, the latte cup still half full. Caption: Day 1 disrupting the cishet capitalist insurance machine. Pronouns in bio, ACAB forever. 400 followers, but the right 400. The likes rolled in from other Berkeley alums and Zoomers who actually get it. I leaned back on my couch, still in my sensible boots, cost more than rent but ethically sourced, or so the boutique claimed, and thought, this company has no idea what's coming. Neither do I really. But I'm never wrong. If anything goes sideways, if claims processing slows, if older employees resist, if Richard starts asking questions, it's because the patriarchy is fighting back. It always does, and I'm ready. My neurodivergent processing style just means I see the truth a little earlier than everyone else. They'll catch up, or they won't. Either way, the transformation has begun. Chapter 2. The second week, I rolled out the pronoun workshop. I booked the largest conference room, ordered oat milk and gluten-free snacks, because inclusivity literally starts with digestion, and prepared a 40-slide deck titled, Pronouns Are Not Polite, They Are Mandatory. 32 people showed up. 18 were over 50. Problematic on every level. I began by modeling vulnerability, as one does. Karen Rue Harper, she, her, and sometimes they, them, when I'm feeling particularly intersectional. I'm here to hold this space safely and with care. A woman in the back, Susan, claims supervisor, late 50s, rolled her eyes so hard, I could practically hear the internalized misogyny clicking into place. I clocked it immediately. Classic. We went around the room for introductions. Most complied, though Gary said he, him, like he was reading the fine print on an insurance policy he didn't want to buy. When we reached Richard the CEO, He had dropped by uninvited. He said him, thanks. Then added, can we get back to actual insurance work after this? I felt the discomfort rise like bile. I'm sitting with some very real discomfort about that comment, Richard. Dismissing identity-affirming labor as not actual work is a textbook hallmark of white supremacist productivity culture. We're literally unlearning centuries of harm here. He smiled that thin, golf course smile and left. Mansplaining an exit form. Noted for the Revolution Journal. After the workshop, I sent a company-wide email, excited to announce our first DEI Friday, mandatory attendance. Topic, decolonizing professionalism. I attached 3 Judith Butler quotes, a Kimberly Crenshaw video, and a gentle reminder that attendance was not optional. No one replied. Silence is violence, but also complicity. Friday arrived, 26 attendees. I wore my curated vintage blazer over sustainably sourced linen, and my statement glasses that scream, academic but approachable. I opened with, professionalism as we currently practice it was invented to police bodies that do not conform to white, male, able-bodied, heteronormative norms. Today we begin to disrupt that. Halfway through my section on dress code binaries, Dave from Underwriting, 61, bald, smells faintly of aftershave and entitlement, raised his hand. So what, we can show up in sweatpants now? I smiled the patient smile I reserve for people still learning. Dave, that question is rooted in a binary understanding of dress codes that marginalizes gender expression and reinforces capitalist notions of presentability. I'm going to need you to sit with that discomfort for a moment. He muttered something under his breath and left early. Later I saw him talking to Gary in the break room, patriarchy caucusing in real time. I documented it. That afternoon I started a new Slack channel, Burnout and Boundaries. First post, reminder, saying no to traditionally feminized administrative labor is an act of radical self-care, which is itself a political act. 17 reactions, mostly emojis, but still momentum. By quitting time I was exhausted from all the educating. I took an Uber home because the bus felt unsafe for my energy. Ordered takeout from the ethical place that charges triple for kale, and scrolled Twitter dragging a white woman who had posted something tone-deaf about allyship. Performative allyship is exhausting, but someone has to do the emotional labor. I fell asleep thinking about how many more learning moments awaited me. The company was already transforming. They just didn't know it yet. Or maybe they did, and were choosing complicity. Either way, I was never wrong. If resistance continued, it was because the patriarchy doesn't give up power without a fight. My neurodivergent processing style just means I see the truth before everyone else does. They'll catch up eventually, or they won't. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, and I'm the one holding the bend.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.
Chapter 3. Month 2 arrived and I pushed harder. Needs-based compensation conversations were first on the agenda. Why should pay be tied to output when needs vary so wildly? One Gen Z hire asked for a raise because her therapy copay was triggering her financial trauma. Another needed more because city rent is literally oppressive. I approved them pending budget review, which I fully intended to submit eventually. Intention matters. Next came trauma-informed workflows. No more hard deadlines because deadlines are a form of structural violence. We switched to intention windows. If someone felt unsafe completing a task, they could pause indefinitely for self-care. Radical, necessary. I arrived late to every single meeting that month, citing energy misalignment from colonial time constructs, which is a legitimate neurodivergent accommodation no one should question. When older men, especially the ones still clinging to their 20-plus years of experience, complained about productivity drops and claims delays, I explained patiently. It's not my policies creating the issue. It's your active resistance to intersectionality. The knowledge you're hoarding was built on oppressive foundations anyway. Letting it go is part of the unlearning. They stared. Some muttered. I documented every micro-expression as potential lateral violence. I changed my hair to lavender that weekend, a clear signal of a new era of resistance, and posted a mirror selfie on Instagram. New hair, same fight. Disrupting the cishet capitalist machine, one intention window at a time. Decolonize the workplace, neurodivergent and proud. 412 likes. My people saw me. Richard called me into his office mid-month. Karen, claims are delayed by weeks now. Clients are furious. Premiums are late. We're getting cancellation threats. I leaned forward, hands folded like I was in therapy. I hear you, Richard. and I'm sitting with some discomfort about how you're centering quantitative metrics over human lived experience. Numbers are a colonial invention designed to quantify and control bodies that don't fit the norm. We're building something better here, equity over efficiency. He rubbed his temples the way men do when they're losing an argument but won't admit it. This isn't sustainable long-term. Capitalism itself isn't sustainable, I countered calmly. What we're doing is planting seeds for a post-capitalist future. Give it time. He sighed the sigh of someone who golfs to escape conversations like this. You have 30 days to show measurable stabilization in output, or we'll have to make structural changes. I left his office crying, not because I was wrong, I'm never wrong, but because the patriarchy was once again weaponizing arbitrary timelines against my neurodivergent processing style and my commitment to justice. It felt like financial violence all over again, just like when my parents cut me off after Berkeley. That night I posted a black square with white text overlay. When the system fights back against transformation, remember your why. The arc bends slow, but it bends. My followers rallied in the comments. You're a hero, Karen. Keep disrupting, Queen. I almost believed it myself. But deep down, in the quiet part I don't share on the grid, I knew the resistance was growing. The older employees weren't just dragging their feet, they were actively undermining the vision. If they didn't align soon, stronger measures would be necessary. The patriarchy doesn't surrender power willingly. It never has, and I was prepared to make it surrender. Chapter 4. The resistance had hardened into something I could name and confront: entrenched patriarchal inertia. The older men especially refused to adapt. They still called meetings meetings instead of spaces. They still used binary pronouns without questioning. They still asked questions like, but what about merit? As if meritocracy weren't a myth invented to keep women like me from rising naturally to director level on day one. I decided it was time for stronger accountability measures. One-on-ones with everyone over 50, starting with the men. Gary first. He sat across from me, arms folded like he was defending a claim file. Gary, I've observed you haven't fully embraced the cultural transformation we're implementing. He shrugged. I process claims, pronouns don't change payout calculations. That's precisely the issue, I replied. You're centering your individual lived experience over the collective equity of the space. That's individualism weaponized by late-stage capitalism. He stared for a long moment. Karen, I've been here 23 years. Longevity in a broken system isn't a qualification, I said gently. It's complicity. I'm offering you a structured path forward. I handed him the performance improvement plan, mandatory attendance at every DEI session, daily reflection journals on unearned privilege, and a commitment to inclusive language in all client correspondence. He signed it, jaw tight, eyes narrow. I documented the microaggression in his expression. Dave was next. Same script. He actually laughed, out loud, in the space. You're serious? I feel deeply unsafe right now, I told him. Your laughter is minimizing my trauma and reinforcing oppressive power dynamics. He stood up. I'm done with this. He walked out. I processed the termination that afternoon, framing it as refusal to engage with transformative justice. The paperwork was flawless. By Monday, 3 more men over 50 had resigned. I accepted each resignation in a calm exit interview, reminding them that their departure created necessary room for marginalized voices to rise. I even offered exit resources, links to Crenshaw articles, and a gentle suggestion to reflect on their role in upholding the status quo. Richard summoned me that afternoon. Karen, we've lost 4 senior claims adjusters in under 2 weeks. Processing times are ballooning. Clients are noticing. We're risking age discrimination complaints. I leaned forward, hands folded in what I hoped looked like calm authority. Richard, I'm sitting with significant discomfort about your framing. These aren't losses. They're intentional realignments to center equity over outdated expertise rooted in oppressive structures. Intersectionality makes it clear. Their resistance was power hoarding, not productivity. This is accountability, not discrimination. The lawyers are already asking questions. Then the lawyers need to center lived experience over colonial legal constructs, I said. If they can't see that, perhaps we need to decolonize HR's relationship with legal too. I arrived 20 minutes late to that meeting. My Uber was delayed by what felt like targeted patriarchal traffic, but I explained it as energy protection. He didn't argue. Progress? I left his office feeling vindicated. He didn't understand yet, but understanding would come. Or consequences. That night I changed my hair to a deeper lavender shade, solidifying the new era of resistance, and posted a subtle story. Mirror selfie with the caption, Sometimes subtraction is the most radical addition. Decolonize the workplace. The views were lower than usual, but the people who mattered saw it. The patriarchy doesn't yield easily. It never has. But I was never wrong, and stronger measures were already in motion.
Let's stay connected. Subscribe and join me on this journey every step of the way.
Chapter 5. I extended the accountability process to the older women next. Susan had been the first warning sign. Her eye rolls during DEI Friday were textbook internalized misogyny. But now it was time to address the pattern. In her one-on-one, I laid it out plainly. Susan, your consistent skepticism is functioning as lateral oppression. Women upholding patriarchal structures against other women is one of the most insidious ways the system maintains itself. She teared up immediately. Karen, I've been here 27 years. I trained half the department. I know these policies inside out. And yet, I said gently, you've never once challenged the oppressive frameworks that trained you. That's not experience. That's complicity. I'm offering you a path to growth. She didn't take it. She left with a severance package I approved on the spot, generous enough to avoid any claims of retaliation, but firm enough to signal the new direction. 2 more women in their 50s followed in the next week. Each time the framing was the same. They were not part of the true woke sisterhood. They were still carrying water for the patriarchy, whether they realized it or not. The floor felt emptier almost immediately, quieter, cleaner in a way. The knowledge they took with them, decades of claims processing nuance, client relationships, legacy policy quirks, drained out like water through a sieve. But I insisted to anyone who asked, mostly the remaining holdouts. This was a feature, not a bug. Unlearning oppressive structures requires subtraction before addition. The gaps would be filled by fresher, more aligned voices. And those voices arrived in waves. I hired aggressively, Gen Z women almost exclusively. In interviews, I asked only 3 questions. 1. What are your pronouns and how do you prefer they be used in professional spaces? 2. How do you practice self-care as a form of radical political resistance? 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you calling in microaggressions in real time? Anyone scoring below an 8 didn't advance. We ended up with a cohort of bright, dyed-haired, pronoun-proud 20-somethings who understood lived experience as non-negotiable truth. They redecorated the break room with affirmation plants and affirmation posters the first week. They opened every meeting with a land acknowledgement, even on the 17th floor of a glass tower. They demanded 4-day work weeks because capitalism's 40-hour model is rooted in colonial exploitation of bodies. I loved them. They were me, but louder, younger, and even less tolerant of compromise. They also burned out fast. After 25-hour weeks, they started claiming deep burnout and requesting indefinite intention windows. One walked out of a team huddle because the fluorescent lights are giving me sensory trauma. I supported it fully. Boundaries are sacred, and enforcing them is resistance. Richard appeared in my doorway more frequently now. Karen, knowledge gaps are creating massive errors. Claims backlog is at 6 weeks. Major clients are threatening to walk. I hear you, I said, folding my hands, and I'm sitting with discomfort about how you keep centering output metrics over human needs. The gaps are temporary. The transformation is permanent. He exhaled sharply. This is not sustainable. You have 30 more days to stabilize or will need to make changes, at the leadership level. I left that conversation crying in the hallway. Not because I doubted myself, I'm never wrong, but because the patriarchy was once again trying to silence the only voice brave enough to name the oppression in the room, through deadlines, through stability, through a man in a suit who golfs. That night I posted a black square. When the system punishes those who dare to disrupt, remember. The arc is long, but justice is patient. My followers flooded the comments with hearts and fists. They saw me. The Gen Z cohort loved it too. They reposted it in their group chat Resist the Grind, with captions like, Queen shit, and this is why we fight. I changed my hair to electric blue the next day. A bolder era, a fiercer one. The patriarchy thought it could outlast me. It was wrong. Chapter 6. Chaos arrived the way chaos always does in a system trying to unlearn itself. Slowly at first, then all at once. The claims backlog hit 8 weeks. Major clients started sending formal cancellation notices. Errors in policy interpretations snowballed. Simple renewals processed wrong, payouts miscalculated, coverage letters sent with outdated language. The phone lines lit up with furious adjusters who had no senior guidance left to consult. The floor felt like a ghost town with too many plants and affirmation posters. I blamed systemic oppression and the holdouts' lingering complicity. The gaps are temporary, I told the remaining team in our daily check-in, which I started 20 minutes late because my morning meditation ran long. Energy alignment is non-negotiable. What we're experiencing is the friction of transformation. Resistance creates heat, heat creates change. The Gen Z cohort nodded vigorously. They had already formed Resist the Grind, a private channel where they posted memes about burnout after 25-hour weeks, and shared TikToks captioned, "When HR says file the claim, but your nervous system says nope." One walked out of a client call mid-sentence because the hold music was triggering my auditory sensitivity. I supported it publicly in Slack. Boundaries are sacred. Enforcing them is resistance. Richard appeared in my doorway every morning now, like clockwork. "Karen, we're facing class action threats. Age discrimination from the terminations, gender claims from the women who left, disability from the intention windows that turned into months-long absences. The board is involved. The CFO is apoplectic." I folded my hands. "I hear you, and I'm sitting with significant discomfort about how you're framing this as a crisis, rather than a necessary reckoning. These lawsuits are retaliation for my lived experience as a disruptor. If the board can't center equity over profit, perhaps we need to decolonize governance too." He exhaled through his nose. "You have 1 week to present a realistic stabilization plan, something with actual numbers and timelines, or we're making leadership changes." I left that conversation crying in the hallway again. Not doubt, never doubt, but the weight of being the only one brave enough to name the violence in the room. The patriarchy was coming for me through legal threats, board meetings, and a man who still believed in measurable outcomes. That night I wrote the 43-page manifesto, Reimagining Haversham, a post-capitalist vision for insurance equity. Sections on abolishing hierarchy entirely, replacing salaries with needs-based stipends, calculated via lived experience surveys, and designating every Friday as a company-wide protest day against late-stage capitalism. I attached 17 infographics I'd made in Canva at 3 in the morning. I presented it in the boardroom the following week. PowerPoint on the big screen. Crystals arranged on the table for grounding energy. My electric blue hair catching the fluorescent light like a signal flare. They listened for 8 minutes. Then the CFO interrupted. "Karen, this isn't a plan. This is a suicide note for the company." I gasped audibly. "That language is ableist and violent. I'm sitting with trauma right now." Richard stood up slowly. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." The room went silent except for my quiet sob. I became the victim in real time. Tears streamed as I gathered my hydro flask, my Smash the Patriarchy tote, the affirmation plants I'd brought in myself. Security waited at the door, 2 large men in black polos, classic patriarchal enforcement. I live-tweeted the entire walk to the elevator. Thread of 12 posts detailing institutional gaslighting, retaliatory silencing of a neurodivergent disruptor, and the patriarchy's final desperate grasp. My followers rallied instantly. "You're a legend, Karen. The system fears women who speak truth." Outside it was raining. I took an Uber home because public transit felt too triggering in that moment. I sat in my apartment staring at the composting bin that still smelled faintly of failure. My Peloton stared back accusingly from the corner. I opened my laptop and drafted a resignation email I would never send. I raised Haversham from its oppressive slumber. If it collapses now, that's on the system that refused to evolve, not on the one person willing to name the violence. I deleted it. I'm never wrong, but for the first time in months I didn't post anything else that night. I just sat there. Quiet. The patriarchy hadn't won, not really. It had just outlasted my timeline. Chapter 7. Back in my apartment I opened every job board I could find. Idealist, LinkedIn, even some niche mission-driven sites that promised equity-focused roles. Nothing paid more than $40,000. My lease was up in 2 months. My parents' credit card still worked for emergencies, but swiping it felt like admitting defeat, like surrendering to the very colonial wealth I'd spent years critiquing. I texted my mother. "The system is punishing ethical leadership, again." She replied almost instantly. "Come home for a bit, honey. We miss you. The guest room is ready." I'd blocked her number for the 3rd time that month. Safety first. Boundaries are sacred. I applied to 12 positions over the next week. 3 interviews materialized. In each one I framed Haversham as transformative leadership interrupted by institutional resistance to lived experience. 2 ghosted me afterward. The 3rd offered $28,000 to coordinate diversity events at a small nonprofit. I declined politely but firmly. I deserve director-level impact, not event coordination. Nights stretched long and quiet. I watched old protest footage on my phone until my eyes burned, then cried during extended self-care baths with the $78 lavender bath salts that promised radical restoration. I changed my hair back to brown. No dramatic new era, just the quiet brown of someone recalibrating. The composting bin still smelled faintly of neglect. My Peloton mocked me silently from the corner, its stats untouched since the termination. 9 days passed without a single post. My follower count dropped from 400 to 387. The algorithm had noticed my silence and punished me for it. On the 10th day I opened Instagram and typed, "Sometimes the most radical act is rest. Taking intentional space to heal from institutional betrayal and gaslighting. Be kind to yourselves and each other." I hit post. The likes came slowly at first, then in a gentle wave. A few DMs appeared. "You okay, Queen? We see you. The system fears women who speak truth." I wasn't okay, but I couldn't admit that, even to myself. I'm never wrong. I just needed a new space to decolonize, one that appreciated my neurodivergent processing style and my commitment to justice, without trying to weaponize measurable outcomes against me. Maybe a nonprofit, maybe freelance consulting, maybe I'd finally launch Rue Harper LLC, equity and transformation consulting for the truly brave. I could offer workshops on dismantling corporate patriarchy, one intention window at a time. I sipped oat milk from my "Nevertheless She Persisted" mug and felt the tiniest spark flicker back to life. The patriarchy thought it had won when it escorted me out with security. It hadn't. It had only delayed the inevitable. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then I opened LinkedIn and started drafting a new bio. Longer than ever. More pronouns, more certifications, more proof that I was overqualified for every role that had rejected me. The arc was long, but it was bending. Chapter 8. 3 months after the security escort, I was still unemployed in the traditional sense, though I refused to call it that. Between transformative roles sounded more accurate. My savings, mostly parental safety nets I'd never asked to inherit, were thinning faster than I'd anticipated. The lease loomed. I took a part-time gig at a feminist bookstore in the city, minimum wage, but the vibes were immaculate. I reshelved zines about intersectional feminism, recommended Judith Butler to nervous college freshmen, and gently corrected customers who said ladies instead of folks. It felt noble. Underpaid, sure, but noble. One slow afternoon I pulled up Haversham's website on my phone. There it was, a press release announcing their new head of HR, a man, 42, MBA from somewhere respectable. First public statement, returning focus to core business operations and client service excellence. Translation, no more DEI Fridays, no more intention windows, no more mandatory pronoun workshops. They'd scrubbed every trace of the transformation like it had been a bad dream. I laughed, bitter, short, alone behind the counter. They'd regressed, proved my point entirely. The system always reverts when the disruptor is removed. I posted a subtle subtweet from the bookstore's Wi-Fi. Some companies choose comfort and profit over justice and equity. Sad, but predictable. A few old coworkers liked it quietly. Silent solidarity from the ones who'd survived. No comments. They were probably afraid. My parents invited me to Thanksgiving again via email, since I'd blocked their numbers. "The guest room is ready. We'd love to see you." I declined immediately. Genocide holiday. I wasn't celebrating colonial myth-making just because there was turkey involved. But when they called from a new number to check in, I answered long enough to accept their Venmo for emotional labor reimbursement after the call. $200 appeared in my account. Reparations installment number whatever. I didn't thank them. Gratitude would imply I owed them something. I started therapy the next week. The therapist was a white woman in her 40s with statement glasses almost identical to mine. First session I spent 40 minutes explaining why her very existence in the field was problematic. White women gatekeeping mental health spaces, perpetuating lateral oppression, centering comfort over accountability. She nodded a lot, took notes, said I hear you more times than I could count. I left feeling heard. Finally. One rainy afternoon I walked past a coffee shop near the bookstore and saw Gary through the window. He was sitting with his wife, laughing over something on his phone. He looked fine. Older, grayer, but fine. Stable. Employed, probably at another insurance company by now. He glanced up, saw me standing in the rain with my hydro flask and my soggy tote. Our eyes met for half a second. He nodded once. No smile, no wave, no warmth. Just acknowledgement. Then he looked away. I felt a pang. Not guilt, never guilt, but something adjacent. Recognition, maybe. that he had survived my transformation attempt, that he had moved on, that the company had moved on. I kept walking. That night I updated my Instagram bio. Former corporate disruptor, resting and recharging, still ACAB, she, her. No more titles, no more claims of ongoing revolution, just the truth of the moment. I posted a photo of my crystals arranged in a spiral on the windowsill. Healing looks different for everyone. Sometimes it looks like quiet. Sometimes it looks like starting over. 392 likes. Slow, steady support from the people who still followed. Progress. I wasn't running the world yet. I wasn't even running a department anymore. But I was still here. And I was still right. The patriarchy hadn't erased me. It had only paused me. And pauses end.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.
Chapter 9. 6 months after the security escort, I finally landed something steady. A remote contract role as a DEI consultant for a mid-sized tech firm in the Bay Area. $45 an hour, part-time, enough to cover rent without dipping too deeply into parental safety nets. The title on the contract read Equity and Inclusion Specialist, Contractor. Close enough to director for now. I accepted within minutes. My first week I audited their entire policy suite. Pronouns missing from email signatures, no land acknowledgements in meeting invites. One recurring all-hands meeting still called all hands instead of all folks. I produced a 17-page report embedded with Kimberly Crenshaw quotes, Judith Butler excerpts, and a section on decolonizing corporate communication. I attached 3 infographics I'd made at 2 a.m. They thanked me via email and said they'd review internally. I knew they wouldn't change a thing, but I'd planted the seed. That's what matters. I started a Substack the same month. Notes from the Resistance, one woman's ongoing fight against corporate patriarchy. The first post, What Haversham Taught Me About Institutional Gaslighting, got 200 subscribers almost overnight. Mostly other white women with similar aesthetics, statement glasses, oat milk habits, pronouns in bios. I charged $5 a month for premium content, extra infographics, affirmation worksheets, and monthly live Q&As on navigating lateral oppression in the workplace. It wasn't 6 figures, but it was mine. No board, no Richard, no measurable outcomes except the ones I chose. I dated someone new around the same time. He, him, called himself a feminist ally, paid for dinner without being asked. We only argued once, over whether Latinx was appropriate. He said most Latinos he knew preferred Latino A or simply Latiner. I explained that lived experience trumps polling data, and that questioning terminology is often a microaggression rooted in discomfort with change. He apologized immediately. We had sex after. It was fine, adequate, not revolutionary, but fine. I still checked my privilege aloud in the mirror every morning. I recognized the unearned access I have to this reflection, this apartment, this contract gig. Ritual, grounding, necessary. I still bought the $14 oat lattes, radical treats for surviving another day in a world that refused to fully decolonize itself. And I still believed I was never wrong. But sometimes late at night, when the Peloton stats glared at me from across the room, and the composting bin smelled worse than ever, I wondered, just for a second, if maybe I'd moved too fast, pushed too hard, alienated the very people I claimed to be liberating. Then I remembered Gary's nod through the coffee shop window, Susan's tears in the one-on-one, Richard's sigh when he said terminated. They were the problem. Always had been. The system hadn't rejected my vision because it was flawed. It had rejected my vision because it worked too well. Too threatening. Too truthful. I closed my laptop. Turned off the light. Tomorrow I'd disrupt again. Somewhere, somehow. Still righteous. Still miserable. Still Karen. Still right. Chapter 10. A year to the day since I first walked into Haversham Assurance. 20 minutes late, hydro flask in hand, ready to decolonize an entire insurance company. I sat in the same overpriced cafe near the bookstore, wearing the same sensible boots, sipping the same $14 oat milk latte, scrolling LinkedIn on my phone. There it was, Haversham's annual report. Clean numbers, stable revenue, new leadership photos, mostly men in suits, smiling like nothing had ever happened. No mention of DEI Fridays, no trace of intention windows, or needs-based stipends, or mandatory pronoun training. The disruptive HR experiment had been erased like a bad footnote. They were thriving again, quietly, efficiently, without me. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. A flicker moved through me. Not regret, never regret, but something close to recognition. They hadn't needed my transformation. They'd needed stability, continuity, knowledge transfer, things I'd burned down in the name of justice, equity, lived experience, things I still believed were oppressive, but things the company clearly valued more than my vision. I closed the tab. I opened a blank document, title, Reflections on a Learning Moment. I typed one sentence. I feel like maybe the patriarchy wasn't the only thing I was fighting. I stared at the words. They looked small on the screen. Vulnerable, wrong. I deleted them, because I'm never wrong. I just navigate learning moments differently now. In a world that doesn't always understand neurodivergent processing styles or the urgency of dismantling systemic harm. In a world that prefers comfort over confrontation. In a world that rewards regression. I finished my latte, left a generous tip, reparations always, and walked out into the January rain. My hair was still brown. No dramatic color change, no new era announcement, just brown, quiet, ordinary. I didn't post about it. No grid photo, no black square, no caption about the arc bending slow. For once, I didn't need the validation of 400 followers to know I was still right. I just kept walking. The rain soaked my sensible boots. The city moved around me, people with jobs, deadlines, measurable outcomes, heteronormative hierarchies intact. They didn't know what they were missing, but I knew. Somewhere, somehow, the disruption would continue. Maybe in a nonprofit, maybe in consulting, maybe in a book I hadn't written yet. The patriarchy thought it had won. It hadn't. It had only bought itself time, and time runs out. I turned the corner, Hydro Flask still warm in my hand, and kept moving forward. Still righteous, still miserable, still Karen.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.